Good morning. So, we're continuing with Vimala's book, Intensive Self-Education, Dedication, but education, self-education. And this chapter is called Our Relationship with Aloneness and Death. One factor that is detrimental to the activization and mobilization of sensitivity is that we take life for granted and indulge in the luxury of forgetting that death is a part of life. We don't look at life as a scientific phenomenon, limited by birth and death. If we kept in mind that death walks hand in hand with us every day and every moment, that there is a possibility of dying in the next hour, then that realization would do the following things. It would stimulate all the energies that we have at our command. It would certainly add an intensity to whatever we do. It would bring order into our lives, and it would change our behavior towards others. And there would be no more postponement in living our understanding. Whatever has to be done would be done today. One could not even tolerate the idea of there being a time lag between our understanding and action, and that this could be the last chance one has to live the understanding. Have you watched your own growth and observed how every hour, or perhaps every day, thousands of cells die in the body and are created anew? This is how we grow from childhood into youth, into adulthood and old age. Dying takes place every minute. Really speaking, life is a dance of birth and death, intertwined with growth and decay. This is a simple fact. Dying is not something tragic. It is taking place here and now. Death need not be equated with destruction. What I wish to share with you is we're watching our own dying every minute, every hour, every day. Though we like to ignore the presence of death and imagine that we are deathless, we're really confronted with the phenomenon of dying every minute that we live. For most of us, death is an idea. We have not observed and watched the fact of death that is taking place within us. Observing the fact of dying that happens every minute will help an inquirer to get free of all the fear and inhibitions about death, about aloneness, about silence. It seems to me that awareness of the presence of death is essential for laying the foundation of any education. As we move in life, watch and observe the movement of nature, we come across the phenomenon of individuals, birds, animals, trees getting born, growing, decaying, and dying. We see it happening around us, and yet there is a resistance to the fact of dying, as far as we ourselves are concerned. As long as there is a psychological resistance to the presence of death and the fact of dying, through which every one of us has to pass, there will be a fear of aloneness. There will be fear of living alone. As long as there is this fear of being unconditionally and absolutely alone, inwardly there will be resistance to allow the mind to go into non-action, to go into abeyance. As dying is organically related to the mystery of the totality, one has to question oneself whether one has seen and observed death. Has one accepted it? Has one accepted that I may fall dead some day, somewhere, in some way? Nobody is going to accompany you when you enact the last role in this drama of life, the role of dying. It's no use sitting down in silence for hours, or indulging in wishful thinking, or creating a world of make believe around ourselves, if inwardly there is a fear of aloneness and dying. When there is no resistance to death and dying, in any manner whatsoever, then one can begin to educate oneself. One educates oneself in living in aloneness at the physical level and the verbal level. Do you see the relevance of solitude? We begin with the education of the senses. The senses have to be educated. They have to learn to be in solitude, away from the lure of the process of becoming, away from the network of those processes of becoming which tempt you every moment, attract you towards them, and entrap you ultimately. Aloneness becomes difficult to live and go through because while you are alone, the total human past contained in you, the patterns of reactions, evaluations, judgments, conclusions, and theories of your own or of others, living and dead, lose their relevance. In aloneness, there's nothing to react to, nothing to compare, to evaluate, nothing to accept or reject. This is the austerity of aloneness, and this frightens us, it scares us. If this happens at the physical level, it is bound to happen at the psychological level. Then there will be the effort, without your knowing, on the part of the subconscious, to retain the company of the past, to retain the company of thought and the movement of words. So going in a retreat is a way of educating oneself. We have learned to be afraid of death, and we will have to unlearn that. In solitude, many things are unlearned, and many things learned. Aloneness implies freedom from the process of verbalization. As long as we are chattering with ourselves inwardly, though we do not verbalize audibly, we are not really alone. We're wandering in the past with words, and the pictures the words create are our companions. We wander into the past, or we indulge in daydreaming and try to create the future. I have gone into all these details because many an inquirer launches upon what observation is, observes, watches, and thereby comes to the frontiers of verbalization and gets stuck there. On the frontiers of the known, many an inquirer stands put, doesn't like to go back to the realm of the conditioned mind. And is afraid to let go the I consciousness and identification with the ego, I'll read that line once again. On the frontiers of the known, many an inquirer stands put and doesn't like to go back to the realm of the conditioned mind and is afraid to let go of the I consciousness and identification with the ego. He neither plunges into the unknown nor goes back to the known and is suspended in between. That should not be the case with any one of us. That is why one is mentioning laying the right foundation. And if one accepts the fact of death, eliminates all the inhibitions and resistances to death and dying, then living in aloneness and solitude would be just fun, no problem, in observation. Observing the mind. The most important act that one can be capable of is living. And living is a movement of the totality of your being. To live is to live in the world. So, what is the world? Is the world outside of you? Or is it inside of you? Are you the world yourself? Have you ever looked really into these questions? Have you ever questioned the validity of your own perceptions of the world? Or have you taken for granted that the world is out there? Learning requires questioning the validity of everything outside and inside. Where is the world? And what is the world? You see the objects, the sense organs bring in the sensations through the contact with that which is outside. The sensations are carried to the brain interprets the sensations. So your perception of the world is really only your own interpretation of the sense data gathered by the senses. The world perhaps exists in the mind, because the mind constructs a perspective out of the interpretation that takes place, according to the conditioning, relying upon the concept of time and space. Time and space themselves have no physical reality, they have only conceptual reality. They're concepts and creations of the mind. So, with the help of these concepts of time and space, with the interpretation according to the conditioning, we have built up our perception and ideas about the world. One more time. Time and space themselves have no physical reality. They only have conceptual reality. They're concepts and creations of the mind. So, with the help of these concepts of time and space, with the interpretation according to the conditionings, we build up our perception and ideas about the world. You see that the world exists really within us. We construct our world. Every individual does it. One who is interested in transformation will have to turn to the mind where the investigation takes place, where the building up of concepts takes place, where the patterns of behavior are constructed, accepted, and repeated. In order to understand the world, one has to understand the dynamics of the mind, the anatomy of the mind. Understanding the nature of mind. Vibrational existence. The inquirer examines and investigates the nature of mind. the mechanism of mind, and learns to use it with great responsibility. What is mind? Mind surely is not the brain. We know the cerebral organ located in the head, placed on our shoulders. Mind is not located in the head or in the chest or somewhere else. It's not a special organ. Mind, which is consciousness, which contains thought, knowledge, and experience, seems to be an energy, a conscious energy which permeates the whole being. Right from the first human being that might have inhabited the globe up to now, whatever the human race has done, known, and experienced has been transmitted into us through the picture of images and words. That knowledge, experience, exists within us in the form of vibrations. It seems to me, and I'm open to be corrected, that the mind has a vibrational existence. We are clothed in the past, clothed in thoughts and ideas, and they exist in us in the form of vibrations. They are engraved in us in the flesh, in the marrow, in the sinews, in the nerves, in the fibers of our being, and as soon as there is a sensual contact with an outer object or a mental contact with a word, these vibrations begin a playback, as in a tape recorder. Your thoughts are the response of a memory which exists in a vibrationary form in the whole of your being. So your thoughts are the response of a memory which exists in a vibrationary form in the whole of your being. The mind is not like an organ. It is your inner being. It is a vibrational being in you. The total past is engraved in every particle of your being, and with the slightest touch of an outer object or a word, memory begins its playback, and you say, I feel this, and I'm thinking these thoughts. It's a playback of memory, right from the crown of the head to the big toe. The whole being is filled with memory. Conditioned energy. The mind is conditioned energy, conditioned by the total human race through untold centuries. The movement of mind is the movement of thought tethered to the past. Thought is a playback and response of memory. Feelings, sentiments are a playback of those conditionings, cultural, racial, religious, communal. These conditionings have been organized and standardized so that you have a Hindu mind, a Catholic mind, a communist mind, a socialist mind, etc. And we have been conditioned cerebrally, neurologically, chemically, to react to situations in a specific way, so that a Hindu mind reacts to a situation in one way and a Muslim mind reacts in quite another way. They are responses that come from memory. You can modify them here and there and feel you have reformed your thinking, but the fact remains that the mind, that is consciousness, is a conditioned energy, conditioned through centuries. Through thought, the total human past gets expressed through an individual, but it does not belong to that person. They are not your thoughts, though they get expressed through you with a tremendous momentum. This is one thing one has to recognize very, very clearly. Mind is mechanical and repetitive. One has to understand that the mental movement is a product of collective organized efforts. When you think, you are only playing back. There's nothing creative about it. The reactions, preferences, prejudices, the norms, the criteria, all have been acquired or absorbed or assimilated by one. One has to come face to face with this repetitive, mechanical movement of the mind, where there is no freedom. Freedom cannot breathe on the level of the mind. The mind is tethered to the past. Mind is tied to the collective. It requires tremendous energy to set oneself free of this organized collective entity of what you call knowledge. The mechanical, repetitive movement is understood to be, or mistaken to be, an original personal movement. May I suggest that thinking never is original? It cannot be original. It has to use thought. Words which have been given meaning collected by human society, and a pattern of reaction to the words also have been organized by different cultures, religions, races, in different ways. If one can see the fact of the whole thought structure being organized and standardized by people, will there be any more attachment to one's likes and dislikes? Will one then pamper one's reactions? Will you indulge in getting addicted to anything if one perceives the simple fact that mental movement is a mechanical movement, and thoughts, feelings, and value structures are all conditionings that have been fed into us? Once we see what we call our thinking, our feeling is just a mechanical, repetitive activity, well, will we then create an authority of the mind? Will we then accept the authority of our likes and dislikes and let them regulate or twist our lives? We will then judge other people according to the norms and criteria we have selected for ourselves. Will we then measure human beings? An inquiry about awareness requires this personal encounter with the mechanical, repetitive, and slavish movement of the mind. We have to observe for ourselves and discover for ourselves the repetitive and mechanical nature of the mental activity to get disillusioned of the power of the mind. Unless we come face to face with this prison house, which we call the thought structure, there will be no urge for freedom. Understanding of bondage stimulates the urge and passion for freedom. This repetitive, slavish, mechanical nature of mental movement is useful while we are living in society. But when it comes to religious inquiry, when it comes to the exploration of that which is beyond thought, that which is invisible, that which is unknown or maybe unknowable, that which is beyond all measures that man has created, then obviously this mental movement is not at all relevant. One has to see the irrelevance of mental movement very clearly before one can talk about the dimension of awareness, which is perceptive sensitivity, which is intelligence having nothing to do whatsoever with the past. One has to see the irrelevance of mental movement very clearly before one can talk about the dimension of awareness, which is perceptive sensitivity, which is intelligence, having nothing to do whatsoever with the past. So until here, for today, I wish you a really good day. Bye for now.